Hey, Canucks fans, I've had some influential people on this channel, local, national, but I've never had the leader of a nation. So I'm thrilled to welcome my guest today, Mr. Rob Fai. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Clay. This has been a long time in the making. I appreciate you finally getting around to me now that you've done all the real people in the city.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule launching new shows to chat with me. But I will say, because I want to talk to you about everything, but I think we have a lot in common because I think we're around the same age. I'm 46. You are
47.
Okay, that's close. We're both good looking. We both have never met a microphone or a camera that we didn't like. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
And we both love wrestling. Now, the thing is, I look at you, you look to be a bit Asian, but I was never sure I didn't know what kind of name Fai is. So tell me, because I'm dying to know.
Yeah, no problem. Fai is actually Ukrainian, shortened when they obviously came over from the motherland, so to speak. But it's not the first time that somebody has said that. And I was actually invited when I was working at News 1130. This is a great story. There was a Chinese acrobat company that came over from, I guess, Asia, and they were performing at what I guess is now the Chan Center for Performing Arts, but it was the Ford Center, something like that at the time.
Yeah, so UBC, right?
What's that?
The UBC.
No, this is right downtown, the big hub. So anyways, it's like 4,000 people sold out, whatever. So I show up and I can tell that the organizers are kind of like, who's this guy? And I'm like, hey, I'm Rob Fai. I'm from News 1130. And then finally, one of the organizers says, oh, we thought you were Asian. So I was kind of like, well, I'm not, but I'm going on stage in like 15 minutes. So true story, I go out onto stage, sold out place, like the greatest acrobatic show I've ever seen. Like Cirque du Soleil's got nothing on the company that came over here. And it's all Asians in the crowd. And that's cool. But I think they were English was not their first language. So I'm out there and I'm telling my stupid jokes like, oh yeah, cream of the crop. And everybody's like, who the is this guy? So long, excuse my language. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the show, I just walked off and I handed the mic to the lady and I go, don't ever call me again. That was mortifying. Like their prime act, the guy that was like the Shin Lim of the show, comes out and he does all this magic, but he doesn't speak English at all. And I don't speak Mandarin. So he's trying to get me to do it. And I just look like a complete bozo the whole time. So I did 90 minutes in front of a sold out crowd, not knowing what I was doing, completely mortified, all because my last name was Fai.
That story is worth this whole 40 minutes alone. That was awesome. Now, is there any video evidence of this, Rob? Is there any video evidence?
Okay, so technically, get a load of this. One of the promoters, a great lady named Betty, I think she was just a part of it. Every year since that event, she has sent me something at Christmas. Every year, without fail. It's been 20 some odd years, but I can guarantee you, a Pedram Christmas card, I always get something from her. But it's funny because over the years, it's kind of devolved. At first, it was a $50 Starbucks card. Eventually, this is a true story. It got to the point where she was sending me her fully stamped bubble tea cards. So I was just kind of like, okay, $50 at Starbucks, pretty good gift, right? But when you get the 10 stamps that are all crooked and stuff on the bubble tea card, you're just kind of like, okay, she's starting to phase out. But
Rob,
yeah, I'll never forget that day. Yeah. I don't know if I've ever been more caught off guard ever.
What a story. And at this rate, Rob, with those gifts, you're going to be owing her something in 10 years if it keeps devolving like that.
I think so. Yeah. I think we're on our way.
So the whole way, my viewers know that I'm very proud of my half Japanese. So Imo, my late father's Japanese and my mom's Chinese. So that's where the very rare mix, given the two countries, obviously the history. But so I'm fascinated when it comes to culture and heritage. So I thought the reason why I got confused, I saw something on your Instagram or your Facebook or your Twitter a few months ago where you talked about your daughter though with being Taiwanese.
Yes.
Or part Taiwanese. That's, I think, where I got really confused.
No, she's my ex was Taiwanese and my wife now is Filipino. So what's interesting is I have two kids. One's Filipino, one's Taiwanese. And what's really cool about it is I've actually gotten to experience two completely different cultures.
Yeah.
And I will say this, Filipino culture is like my spirit animal. I love being a part of them. I've gone to the Philippines a couple of times, and every time I'm over there, I just sit to myself and I'm like, man, there's a lot that our society could take from that part of the world,
Yeah.
because the kindness, the teamwork, the things that they're willing to do for each other in the community is something that I think should be the blueprint for the world.
Well
And
said.
it's really inspiring, to be honest.
Minus the traffic, maybe.
Yeah, the traffic's crazy. True story, though. I went there for a wedding once, and for like $250, you can get a police escort. So we went like 30 kilometers right through the heart of like Manila, like Makati and all these different places, and traffic parted, and we were all scooted through like we were like the president of the country. And I said, man, how much did this cost? It was like $250. I'm like, dude, we got to do this every time, because it was crazy. But yeah, the traffic there's like, it's bananas.
But, well, and then I'll move off into some other stuff. But that's another thing we have in common. You are married to a Filipina, and my wife Gail, born Chinese blood, but born and raised in the Philippines. So I knew that we get along just fine. All right, let's get into this. Where did your love for broadcasting and media come from?
That's a great question, because it was something that I kind of backward walked into. So I was going to Capilano College before it became Capilano University. And I was working, well, I shouldn't say working. I was working at the KEG, but I was playing with the National Baseball Institute as a walk-on. So I wasn't getting a lot of time on the field. I was kind of the guy that made sure that, you know, the big players had what they needed. And at Cap College, they would have this game of the week, and it was Rogers Community Television, and they would do a broadcast of the Capilano College men's basketball team. And I was the PA announcer. So it was nothing's better than being a PA announcer in an empty stadium or an empty gymnasium, because you're going off. You're like, at guard, 5-3. And there's like 8 people there, and 2 of them are like on their phone, like, who the fuck is this guy? So anyways, I saw the TV guys and how well they were treated and how respected it was. And all of a sudden, I walked over to the guy and I'm like, hey, if you guys ever need anything, I'd love to help out. I'm trying to get into the industry, even though I wasn't. And wouldn't you know it, true story, the next week, I guess one of the guys, the color commentator, he ended up getting sick, and they called me and they said, hey, you know what? If you can fill your PA position, you can do the color. So easy to find a PA guy, you know, just get a high school kid or whatever. So I ended up doing the color for a sport that I had no idea what I was talking about at all. Didn't know what camera to look into, just basically followed the other guy around and got through it. The guy in the truck comes up to me afterwards and says, hey, we really like this. Do you want to do a bit more of this? And I was like, sure. He goes, good. We got a lacrosse game coming up, a Western Lacrosse Association game coming up. I'm like, I'm in. I don't know anything about lacrosse either, but I did a couple of those games. And then eventually they said, hey, we have this weekly TV show. It's out in Surrey, and it's called In Sport. And it had Steve Erickson and a couple of guys that were in this industry for a long time. And I ended up doing that. And then they put me with David Benefield of the BC Lions. And that's when it kicked off. All of a sudden, we had a bit of traction. We had the pauser calling in. And and then next thing you know, I got a job at a radio station, and I got hooked up with the Moj. And the Moj was the guy that opened all the doors for me. Wow. So I went from the guy that said, hey, if you need a backup, let me know, to working with the Moj that got me into TSN 1040, that got me to Powell River, that got me to News 1130, that got me back to TSN, that got me to the Canadians, that got me back to TSN, to get me to this conversation.
Wow. Great story. I love what you said about the gym filled with 8 people. You don't even need the microphone. You could just start yelling at them, right?
I could have, yeah. It's totally true. I could have.
So how about in high school? Were you comfortable with public speaking, and not necessarily being class clown, but at least being able to speak and present and lead groups and all that kind of thing? Because you have a nice tenor in your voice, obviously, a nice, clear, articulate way of presenting, but that has to come from somewhere.
I was the grade 11. This is great, Clay. You asked such good questions. I was the grade 11 and grade 12 PA announcement. So, you know, like after the first class, you have the teacher that comes on and says, here's this morning's announcements.
And 500 kids are rolling their eyes, right?
Yeah. I was the guy that came on. But I actually, it's the first thing I ever got fired from, because so my buddies, you know how you have your friends in school and they're all like, hey, man, you got to say this. So I actually said to one of the teachers in class, I'm like, we have a special announcement here. Mr. Walker and his 3 hairs will be in the barbershop after school today. If anybody wants to see, call it. And so the vice principal came out and said, can't do that. You're out. And I was like, I was mortified. I'm like, dude, everybody loves this act. This is a great gimmick. And that was the last that I did of it. Got fired from my first job as the public morning announcer at Lester B. Pearson High School.
I'm convinced once this pandemic thing ends, we just got to go out and have a few and just because we could do this for hours, man. This is hilarious.
A few what?
Well,
What do you drink?
I drink Pepsi. I don't know what you drink.
Clay, I was a bartender for 11 years. I've had every drink under the sun. I've told my son, so my son's getting ready to graduate from high school.
Yes.
And I've always told him, I'm like, dude, whatever you do in life, I don't care if you work in construction or you're a surgeon, make sure you take a year or two out of your life and do bartending. You can do it anywhere in the world. It's the greatest job because you're always the person that the people want to talk to, and it increases your ability to communicate. Clay, I could sit here for 5 hours. I actually, when I was bartending at a club that people might know as Big Bamboo, but I did it afterwards when it was Daddy-O's, they said, hey man, our DJ needs an MC. And I'm like, yeah, man, of course. I love this stuff. It's for ladies' night. So I'm like, well, cool, sign me up. I was single at the time. So anyhow, long and the short of it is I ended up becoming the guy on the mic that would introduce all the male strippers before they came out to like 200 women that were ravenous, that were all excited. So I was the chubby white guy that would come out and I'd be like, hey, everybody, don't forget to get your, kamikaze shots. And then this guy with like, a different anatomy than I had, or whatever you call that. Anatomy.
Anatomy.
Autonomy.
Anatomy sounds like something in space.
Yeah, I got nothing. So anyways, and I would do that, and then I would go bartend, and I bartend till like 2:30 in the morning. Then we'd go eat Chinese food. I'd get home at like 5 every morning. But the experiences that I got in bartending are, I think, 80% of the reason that I'm half decent at my job today. I could have gone to BCIT. I could have gone to wherever. The best experiences that I ever got interaction-wise were as a bartender, and there's nothing even close to it.
Great story. So your son is in grade 12?
Yeah, he graduates this year.
Yeah, so my middle guy's in grade 12. That's cool. Your eldest is?
18.
Yeah.
Or 17. I should probably know that. Yeah, cool. 17. He's going to be 18 in a month.
Awesome. And my eldest is 19. So we're about the same, same vintage, same age. Very, very cool. All right. So you went through your passion, your start in the gym, your history. That's awesome. And when did you realize you had the gift of gab? Are we okay talking about TSN 1040 just for a couple minutes and then moving on to what?
Anything you want, man. Anything.
I appreciate that about you, brother.
I already told you, Clay, that I was the least hung guy in a nightclub. Like, obviously you could talk about TSN.
Yeah, that's like, okay. Tell me your first reaction, and did you have any idea it was coming?
No idea. I had worked the night before. Yeah. That morning, I got my schedule for the next 2 weeks emailed out to me. Like, that's how surprised I was. Yeah. So long and the short of it is I saw a couple of things on, I don't know if it was Twitter or something like that, where the station had gone dead or whatever. And I remembered it was like within 5 to 10 minutes, I emailed Ian McClutchy. And I was just like, hey, man, everything good? And he goes, did you get the email? And I'm like, I didn't, because my email wasn't attached to my phone. My Bell Media wasn't attached to it. So he says, hey, man, there's a conference call at like 9:30 or something like that, and you probably want to be on it. So I thought, just because of the industry and the way everything's going, that, maybe somebody got fired, or even a couple of people got fired. Yeah. But when you realize that not just everybody in the station got let go, but they actually just took the whole format out of the building. I never forget it. I got off the conference call. We own 2 apartments in the same building. So we live up on 4. My wife and I work down on 2. So I went down and she was on a conference call at work. And I opened the door to her office, which I never do. And she looked at me. She goes, I'm on a call. And I looked at her and I go, you need to get off. And so she knows that look in my face. It's only happened once or twice. So she ends up getting off the call. She's like, what's the matter? And I looked at her, and I don't well up for anything. Like, I don't know what it is. It's just not a part of my mental makeup. And I just looked at her and I just said, you're never going to believe this. I go, the whole station is done. Like, it's just over. And so I'm trying to explain to her. And the hard part for me personally, if I can personalize this for a second, and I think I want to personalize it because I think you got to look at these people as more than just on-air talents. You got to look at them as humans as well. For me, the reason that I left the Vancouver Canadians was because I realized that I didn't want to be off the radio for a year, that I loved it, that I wanted to be a part of something that it's a part of my DNA. I mean, I'd been broadcasting Canadians baseball at TSN since 2007. And I just said, screw it, I'm going to do it. I went to barbering school based on the fact that I was going to be working at TSN and I was going to try to at least keep our heads above water financially doing that. So to all of a sudden be halfway through barbering school, have the carpet pulled out from under us, I looked at her and I said, okay, I'll just stop barbering school. I'll figure something out. And then she said, nope, you're going to finish school. We'll figure this out together. You got to finish school and something else will eventually come your way. Wow. So I just remember looking back at that moment thinking, man, Ian McClutchy and his 3 kids, Karen Sermon, who's been at that station, Eddie Gregory's been there shortly after the creation of Fire, Chantel Chand, who I worked with. Like, I didn't think of them as like morning anchor, afternoon anchor, morning drive. I looked at them as people. Jeff Patterson's got 2 kids. I was just like, that's what hurt the most. Wasn't the fact that the station evaporated. I mean, that's just bad. That's bad business, but I mean, it is what it is. Just seeing all these regular people that you're friends with leave was just unceremoniously frustrating. And even 2 weeks later, I still look back and I'm just like, there had to be a better way to allow these legends in the market the chance to say goodbye.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Rob, for being so honest. If I may, I heard, but I would love to hear from you, and you tell me how much you want. Were you going in and doing that show pro bono, like on your own coin time?
Yeah, so the agreement that we had in place was it was based on ad revenue. It was the Tom Mayonek model, and essentially it was the early Bob Marjanovic model. So I wasn't afraid, to do it. The thing in retrospect that I look back on, it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do in the middle of a pandemic, because there, a lot of advertising budgets have been tightened up. People have been furloughed. This is probably the worst time to walk in and ask somebody for advertising revenue, which I'll circle back on in a minute.
Sure.
So for, I guess, 4.5, 5 months, I didn't get paid a dime at all. Came in every day, did my show. Everybody around me got paid. They'd bitch because there was nothing on the free table. And I'd sit there and I'd be like, guys, I'm the last guy you should be bitching about that too, because I haven't made a penny here, but I never complained about it. It was just, I knew what I had signed up for. T-Mart had made it crystal clear at the beginning, like, hey, there's not going to be anything for you down the road financially. So this is what it is. You make your decision. You're a big boy. And I'm like, man, I'm going to make this work. And the reason I say hold on that is because since I've gone into the YouTube world, the different platforms, and created a different show, I've had people approach me saying, we'd love to be a part of your show. We'll buy advertising packages. We're up to like 7 advertisers in a week with no anything. We just basically said, here's a show, follows the Canuck games, and I want to do it with small business. I had a big business approach me, and I actually said no. I'd rather have my guys that I trust, I know, and I want to help them out as much as they're helping me out, and we're going to get through all this together. So it's been unique, but yeah, I didn't get paid a penny at TSN for 5 months. Some people think that makes you a lesser broadcaster. I think that's just you're willing to bet on yourself.
And to me, it just speaks to your character and your integrity overall, Rob.
Oh, thanks, man.
No, great segue into the nation. So tell me, this cryptic, goofy voice comes on the radio at 9:30 saying TSN 1040 is no longer. How long between that announcement and that conference call to the fact where you're saying, I'm not moping, I'm not done, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it like no one else has done it?
A day. I mean, realistically, so the backstory on this is that the company that I ended up calling was the production company that did Canadians baseball on Sportsnet 2 years earlier. So I remembered Peter Young from the conversations that we used to have, and he'd always have these really quirky ideas like, hey, we can do this on the broadcast and we could do this. And the Canadians just wanted structure. They just wanted to get on the air. They wanted it to look as close to what the Blue Jays were doing. They didn't want bells and whistles, which in year one of an agreement, you can kind of relate to.
Sure.
But I always remembered that. So I called him the next morning. And I also realized that Scott Ackles was working with the company. And Scott's a guy that produced Grey Cups. He used to work as an executive with the Calgary Stampeders. I mean, he had a great sports background. So I called them cold call, like straight cold call. I'm like, hey, Peter, it's Rob Fai. I don't know if you remember if you're with the Canadians. I said, I've just been let go as a part of a mass exodus from TSN 1040. And he goes, oh, no, I've totally heard. He goes, how you doing? I said, I'm okay. I said, I got an idea, but I wanted to kind of pass it by you. I said, I'd love to be able to do a show that we could pre-package or, do live, whatever. He goes, can you be at the studio at 9 a.m. tomorrow? He didn't want to mess around. So I show up the next morning. We sat in front of a whiteboard and took it from concept on a napkin to we will be live 5 days later on Monday. Wow. And their investment in the show is significant. Like, I walked in with no capital, no money, just my name, a modest following, and the belief that we could do something like this.
Yes.
So wouldn't you know it, 5 days later, the lights go on and people are like, what is this? And I didn't have any guests on show one. It was me with no teleprompter for an hour, just trying to talk about as many sports as I could. But I knew, excuse me, I knew that if I was going to take this show one last level, that I wanted to have this truly be Canuck centric, because I would read the comments and they're like, hey, great show, but if you're going to call yourself a Canuck post-game show or a hockey post-game show, you should probably talk more about hockey. So at that point, I had a decision to make. Am I going to be Rob Fai Nation Radio from TSN, or am I going to be a Canucks post-game show and really go after that niche market? I took the latter after I talked to Jeff Patterson, and I said, Jeff, do you want to come on? And he's like, you know what? I'll help you out. And it was a one-off. And he came on. We had great numbers, like really good numbers. Like I think we capped out at like 950 live viewers while he was on. We had over 5,000 views within 24 hours. Like it was something where I was like, this is kind of cool. I had Dave Tomlinson the next night. I had Samantha Chang last night, who I've got all the time in the world for. John Abbott came on. And at that point, J-Pat and I got together again. And I said, hey, Jeff, now I've done a couple of shows. What do you think? And he goes, I'm in. He says, I can't commit to your whole schedule, but I can give you a good portion of it. And I thought to myself at that point, if Jeff, who's a super critical guy, like he wouldn't jump on something if it was shitty. It's just not his style.
Yeah.
To see him have some buy-in, Dave Tomlinson had some buy-in. Now all of a sudden I had a game plan. And I think even though our numbers still obviously are going to increase over the next couple of months, it's been crazy that 2 weeks ago, this wasn't even a thought. And now we're getting ready for 4 games in 6 days. And I feel pretty confident where we're at.
No, that is great. And it's funny you mentioned Samantha. I've never met her. We trade messages on Twitter all the time. She's brilliant. Obviously, she's a good communicator. Help me, Rob. If I ever get on the wrong side of an argument with Samantha, you got to help me and you got to back me up.
You're on your own, man. One of the things that I like about her, and I know that sometimes it can be polarizing on Twitter and on social media, is she knows her stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most intimidating thing for trolls, is it's real easy to take shots at guys that have, hard takes, but she's factual and she's not afraid to back down from the tough issues. And I remember when I first met her, it was online doing a jersey competition. It was my best jerseys against her best jerseys on Area 51. And it was a little while after that where I circled back and I said, hey, Sam, I've got this show that we're putting back on air at TSN 1040. I'd love to have you as a part of it. And even though we only got her on that show modestly, when I took to this show, I circled back with her right away and I said, Sam, I hope you know that she goes, I'm in. And I go, good, because you're a part of this. And she's been a huge supporter of just me as a person. Yeah. But I watch her and I think she's criminally smart. And I think she's really understanding of the ebb and flow of when to go and when not to go. Yep. And she doesn't back down. Like the Cara McCormick stuff, which a lot of people at TSN were kind of like, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. She was right in there and she's right to do it. She talks about the fact that there's 48 hours left in the month of February and the Canucks haven't really acknowledged Black History Month, which is another, should we, shouldn't we? Mm-hmm. I love that she's forward facing on that stuff. So that's a part of the attraction to just surrounding yourself with people that are better than you makes you better. She's made me better just having a peripheral on the things that most mainstream media are a little nervous to talk about because it is a little disruptive. I love that she's got no problem being disruptive.
I love the way you use the word criminally smart because she's a lawyer. I'm not sure if you did that on purpose, but that was good.
I didn't. I don't think she does criminal law, but she's probably smart not to.
And you're right about surrounding yourself with people who are better or more talented or smarter, in certain respects. Why do you think I do so many of these Zoom chats? Okay, so let's keep talking about the nation. I'm curious. Tell me, Rob, one thing that was easier than expected in getting the show up and running. And tell me one thing that you thought would be easy, or at least you found to be a little more difficult than you expected.
Yeah, I think the easy part was, or the part that ended up being easier than I thought was the sales part of it. And I think this comes back to sales 101. You've got to believe in the product that you're selling.
Yeah. And
this goes back to my time with TSN and even the Vancouver Canadians. Let's take TSN as the example because the Canadians were so good to me. Bell Media was such an expensive ask. And I always thought to myself, I'm like, man, I just feel like going into these partners, it was overpriced, for lack of a better phrase. And so I never really felt confident walking in with the sales kit saying, hey, I'd love to bring you on. It's only $22,000, only $22,000. Like it never felt right.
Yeah.
So now that I've got a product, I understand what my overhead is. I understand what I can bring to the table, but I control the narrative. Now, when I walk in with a price that's far inferior to that bell price, but yet probably presents the same amount of opportunity, I feel really confident walking into somebody's office saying, man, I got something for you that's on the ground floor. You're going to want this. I promise you, there is nobody in this industry that's going to sell harder for you than me, because I know where I came from. And I've just spent the last 5 minutes doing this for free. So I had nothing to lose. But it was kind of like the Jerry Maguire, Rod Tidwell. I had one client, I had one guy, and I was going to work the pavement for that guy as best that I can. And that guy was Savvy Singh, who's a real estate guy. Here's a story very quickly about him. He was one of my first advertisers. And he basically, the day that TSN folded, reached out to my barber school and paid for a month of my tuition.
Wow.
A listener knew what I was going through and proactively reached out to my barber school and paid for a month of my tuition. Now, did he need to do that? No. But he knew enough about me because of what I put out on the air. And I was real about everything in my life. Like I tell this to my family. I'm like, I'm sorry, everything's on the table. He did that for me, which took so much pressure off of me as I panicked and figured out what I was going to do. So when he said he wanted to advertise, I said, Savvy, not only am I going to cut you a killer deal because of the man that you are, but I'm going to work my ass off to make sure that you get this back tenfold. And that to me is what made it easy, is when you've got people that are truly invested in you, you can sell that super easy. The hardest part for me is containing the excitement that I have, because I sit there. Well, no, think about it, Clay. You want to put out 10 bells and whistles and you see that you're getting a little bit of heat. So you want to duplicate it. You want to do the Nation Winnipeg and the Nation Hamilton and help out all those other TSN markets that had structural, changes. But you've got to walk before you can run. So I find myself constantly saying, Rob, great idea, maybe next year, but for now, just sand the edges of what you've got here, make it as good as you can. And next year, if this works well, they'll be back. But I've just sat here, Clay, and I'm like, I think the thing that caught me off guard was how easy it was for the radio listeners to change their medium. Yeah. Like I thought, oh my God, I'm going to lose everybody. I'm going to have to start from scratch. The fact that those radio people have had no problem sliding over into the YouTube world or the online platform, I'm really proud of them. Like, I think that's fantastic that they've been able to work with me and follow. And people ask if I'm competition to 650. Not at all. It's a completely different narrative. So I love the guys at 650, even though Brendan Batchelor stole my shit the other day when he cut that promo as The Rock.
I saw that.
Yo, Brendan's one of my really good friends. Like I've got no problem with him doing it, but as I watched it, I'm like, I'm gonna hustle this guy as soon as I get it. I text with Canberra. I'm like, you guys are cold blooded, man. He goes, it wasn't my idea.
Yeah. So for better or worse,
I love those guys, but it's smart.
For better or for worse, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw Batch do it, and he did fine. And I liked it actually because it's a tiny bit out of character for him, which I think makes it even more appealing.
Yes,
but yes, you can't match the originator of.
I was all over him about that.
Yeah, no, wonderful words about what's been great and what's been challenging. And I've never done this before. I'll call this Clay's confession, and I'll just go for about a minute here. You may be aware that I do something on YouTube post game as well, and I'll be very honest, Rob. I'll be very honest, and I've said this a couple of times on my own live stream. I was worried when I saw that you were doing something. I was like, oh, there goes there goes my audience, there goes my show kind of thing, and so I wasn't scared. I wasn't going to fold up but I know that Vancouver, especially, there's enough eyeballs and ears for there's space for all content creators, and that's something that I've been preaching for years, like vlogs and podcasts. But then when it happened, quote, to me, not even happened. It was funny. My first reaction, admittedly, was like, oh dang, maybe no one's gonna watch my stuff. Thankfully, like, I've seen a bit of a dip, but thankfully, there's still people that come. And I figured out what happens is everyone goes to your show like right after the game ends. I do my little other post-game stuff, my recaps and stuff for YouTube. Then I come on about half an hour later, and then I think as soon as your show ends, I see a small blip in my numbers. So all to say, yes, there's a lot of room for content creation. I got over myself pretty quickly, And I think, like you said, 650 is not competition. Clay Emo is not competition. There's a lot of room for content creation and doing slightly different things. I love how you bring in actual guests, whereas me, I riff for 5 minutes and I just start reading comments and let people go crazy. And it's good. So all to say, I've watched all 6 of your shows, but I can't watch them live because I'm doing my own thing.
No, you know what, Clay? I'll tell you this. I've got no problem with you admitting that, but there's no confessional needed because the content is out there. And both of us are trying to change the narrative of how you consume that information. Yeah. I mean, you got to think of these people that for years and years and years have always looked to TV with sports page, or they look to the radio with the post-game shows. This is, as crazy as it sounds to a certain demographic in this market, it's still a new concept. Yeah. Like to be able after the game to look at your smart TV, to talk into your controller and say, YouTube Rob Fai Nation, or YouTube Clay. Yeah, that's new for a lot of people. So the more that we can collectively shift the habits of a viewer or a listener to what we're doing, we're going to be innovators down the road. Like I've already said that there's going to be 20 more people doing this the next time the season starts. So the question is, what can you do to differentiate yourself from that market? And people will remember who the OGs are. So Clay, the fact that you've been at it for as long as you do, it's super well deserved. You're super like you're incredibly likable to the point that I want to strangle you. But more than anything, I think you bring good content forward and you're interactive. I tell people all the time, the morning show at TSN, Halford and Bruff, used to turn their phones off on purpose. They're like, we're not taking any calls. Yeah. I'm like, dude, you could not have more polarizing shows at the opposite end of the day, because all I wanted were calls. If I could have done 2 hours of just calls, I would have. And by the time I got to the end of our run, I took 90 minutes of straight calls one night. I'll never forget it. It was fantastic.
I mean, and well, thank you for those kind words, Rob. I truly appreciate it. And it's nice to know that, I got your back kind of thing. And maybe one day down the road, we can do this collab thing where I'm live streaming while I'm on your show. I think that'd be kind of cool, actually.
Sure, Clay, whatever you want, man.
We'll figure it out.
That's an interesting one. And then I could do a show that essentially is watching your show, and we could just be, I see where you're going with
maybe one of those weird, Matrix weird.
And Facebook Dave can be the guy that operates the board and make sure it all works.
I love it. I love it. Okay, before we get into the Canucks, just a couple minutes. Where does your love for wrestling come from? And I know you're not just this, I started watching when John Cena. I know you are a Stampede wrestling guy. You are an 80s Macho Man, Hogan, Andre, Bundy, Stud, even guys before that. Where did it come from?
This is going to sound really bizarre, and this is not made up. This is a true story. So I used to be in like Wolf Cubs. You know how there's like Scouts and Beavers and Cubs. So I was in Cubs, and one of our field trips was to Maple Leaf Gardens to watch a WWF match. So I didn't know anything about wrestling. So my first ever foray into that genre, that, world wrestling, was Maple Leaf Gardens. The headline match was Rowdy Roddy Piper against Cowboy Bob Orton. And Rowdy Piper comes out to the bagpipe music. And you got to remember, there's no commentating at these matches. It's just basically see these guys hit each other, whatever. Roddy Piper comes out, and I was lit, man. Like, even my pack leader came over. He's like, Robbie, sit down, buddy. Like, take it easy. I was fully marking out. I had no money, but that year I had to make sure that I got a Hot Rod t-shirt. And I wore that t-shirt. It was a white shirt with red piping. I wore that shirt till it was beige. Like, it was the dirtiest shirt, but I'd pull it out of the laundry hamper and I'd wear it again. I was so into wrestling there from that point on. So when I was good in school, which wasn't very often, but when I was good at school, my mom would let me stay up Saturday night to watch Saturday night's main event. So now you get to see Hulk Hogan, and you get to see the Ultimate Warrior and steel cage matches. And you're just like, holy shit, this is the greatest thing ever. And then as a kid, you get to see Miss Elizabeth, and you're like, I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Like, it was crazy. Like, you're just like, how does this happen? And then you get to the Attitude Era, and then you get to like the promos that were being cut. And like Macho Man for me is still on my Mount Rushmore of greatest promo cutters ever. Yeah. Like, loved it. Just the intensity. Jake Roberts could whisper and you'd listen to every word because he was that crazy. Yeah. Like, I just thought, I tell people this all the time. Clay, you've opened up a can of worms. I hope you could go get a coffee. Come back. I'll still be talking about this.
I love this. And we have no limits on the length of this conversation.
Well, I'll tell you this.
The longest one.
every sport that is broadcast publicly could take notes from guys like, JR. People ask me all the time. They're like, oh, who's your favorite broadcaster of all time? And everybody thinks I'm going to say, oh, Vin Scully or Jerry Howarth or some baseball guy, whatever. And I tell people Jim Ross. And a lot of people are like, well, who's Jim Ross? And I'm like, Jim Ross has the ability to take something that is completely made up, fully scripted, and make it sound like it is must-watch television every single week. And in his prime, when he was really that good, you couldn't wait for the next show. And I thought to myself, that's what makes a good broadcaster. Anybody can tell you that the guy hit a ball to right field and that guy at second's going to come around to score. But can you do it with the cadence and the intensity and the build up to make it sound like, holy shit, put down what you're doing. I got to see this. And that's what he brings to the table. And that's what wrestling was for me. Wrestling is the blueprint for how I've done every single job in broadcasting in some way, shape, or form, whether it's being better at describing things, using a different articulation, using words, like Gorilla Monsoon used to be, he'd always say like, oh, he hit him in the solar plexus. Well, what's a solar plex? But it was just, you're like, oh, he must have hit him somewhere hard because the solar plexus, like that was such a neat theater of the mind for me that I still carry that into any job I do today.
Wow. Love it. And I can see how it's influenced, a lot of things you do, even those little goofy little promos with Chantel that you guys were doing for your shows and stuff.
We were building to do the $1 Million Man one where I was going to be Ted DiBiase and she was going to be Virgil. And we actually had picked out the little kid who was going to dribble the ball. It was my godson, Jackson Chu. And he was going to dribble the ball and I was going to kick the ball away. Wow. Like we were there. Like you ask Chantel, man, she was ready to cut the sleeves off of one of her jackets to look more like Virgil. Like Chantel's such a cool person to work with. Like never says no, always in for whatever. I mean, we did something where she was in the box of cereal. Like I love her. She's such a good person. And I hope the world falls at her footsteps because I think she's such a talented star. And she's probably the thing that I miss the most about TSN. Just the interaction, the connectivity. When you've got a colleague that you can work with and you kind of get it, like Nira and Kid Carson and all the greats that have worked together, Nat and Drew, I felt that kind of connection with Chantel. And doing this show is cool, but it's almost like Andy Dufresne in Red. Like it's like she's gone off and now she's got her boat in San Juantaneo and I'm reading the cards back in the jail and I'm just like, Andy Dufresne. It's where we are. But one day I'm sure we'll reconnect down the road.
Nicely done. Shawshank Redemption is actually my favorite movie of all time. That was very well done. One thing about wrestling, it's so funny. People ask me what's your favorite Canucks memory from Pacific Coliseum. I can't remember any because I was actually a little young. I started going more when they went to GM Place, Rogers Arena now. So my favorite memories from the Coliseum are when WWF came through. And I don't know if you read the dirt sheets or behind the scenes stuff or you get into that. I do. And my most memorable match was when Macho Man filled in to fight one-man gang and it was supposed to be Hogan, but apparently Macho and Hogan got into something, in real life. They said that Hogan's black eye was because of a weight falling on him, but it's supposedly that was Macho Man punching him out for something. And that's when Macho Man started his meteoric rise as a face as opposed to a heel. So my little 2 bits there.
I love that one-man gang reference. I didn't think I'd hear that today. I met Hulk Hogan like a year and a half ago down at his shop because I used to cover spring training for the Canadians. And I went down there and I walked past Hogan's beach shop and it was him and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And I was just like, hell no, I'm going in for sure. It was $200 to get in. So I'm like, dude, I'm not paying 200 American dollars. Yeah. So I went, I got an ice cream. I came back, the same person's at the door. They're like, hey, you want to come meet Hulk Hogan? And just before I could say no, they're like, it's $20. I'm like, that's pretty steep decline. So $20, hell yeah. So I go in, I wait in line. There's 2 people in front of me. Okay. Brutus the Barber Beefcake is like almost incoherent. Like he's had a tough go, man, with all the injuries and painkillers and all the stuff that he's challenged himself. I mean, it's tough to see your guys that you looked up to and they're in that state, but he's still a guy who's working hard. I think it was the year they put him into the Hall of Fame. So Hulk Hogan's there and Hogan's sharp as a tack, man. He's ready to rock. And so it's finally my time. And I come up and I it's the immortal Hulk Hogan who I've looked at for generations. It's like, God, I love this guy. And he's like, hey man, how's it going? And I said, oh, I'm pretty good. He goes, what are you doing in town? Because I'm sure you could tell within 3 seconds and I'm not from, Clearwater. So I'm like, oh, I'm a baseball broadcaster. I'm down here for a week. And he's just like, cool, brother, cool. And I'm just like, it's not cool, but thanks for making me feel. And I look over at Beefcake and he's just kind of like this. And I'm just like, they're like, all right, turn around, do the picture. So in typical Rob fashion, I've got to put my arms around him because that's what you do. You can't just stand there. You got to make it look like your boys from back in the day. So I put my hand around Beefcake and Beefcake's like, what was that? I look at Hogan and Hogan's wearing this like, I don't know what the proper term for this is, an undershirt. I was going to call it a wife beater, but an undershirt.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I put my hand around his, and so I feel his shoulder. Yo, true story. It felt like, you ever see the movie The Fly with Jeff Goldblum?
Yeah. I don't like where this is going.
When he's turning into the fly. I guess he shaves his back and he hadn't done it in a couple of days. It was like the coarsest sandpaper I've ever felt in my life. So the picture, as the lady takes it on my phone, she doesn't know how to work it. So I'm like this, and my face is like it's such a weird photo, and you can totally see it in my face because I'm like, oh God. I didn't know what to do. Like Beefcake's comatose. Hulk Hogan's like growing a third arm. I was like, what am I doing? So I walked out of there and I was just like, that was the most surreal moment of like my whole life. But the best part is when Hulk Hogan left, he said, have a great one, brother. And I looked back at him, and this is why I still do this on my radio show. I looked back at him, and the only thing that came out of my mouth was brother. So every time that I mentioned that on my show, you always hear it. I'd be like, we got a great show for you tonight, brother. I'd always say the second brother in lieu of my conversation with Hulk Hogan in real life, where I totally froze and can only come out with one word.
That is is that why? So this makes perfect sense now, Rob. When we were setting this up through Facebook and I messaged you and I said, looking forward to it, brother. Right at the end, you put brother in brackets. And I actually thought that, I didn't know if I made you mad or if I offended you. Now I get it.
No, I always say it. It's like a total reaction. It's like when you say thank you, my reaction is to say you're welcome. So when you say brother, I just always say brother. As Hulk Hogan, by the way.
Great story. Okay, 45 minutes in, we'll get to the Canucks now, just for a few minutes. Because
why not?
You talk about them 3 or 4 times a week, so do I. So, but let's talk about this. What are they playing for right now?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I still don't feel like they realize where they are in the standings. It's such a weird way to say it, but I always talk about sense of urgency. Yeah. And kind of understanding, like getting your bearings. And I've just not heard in any of the post-game press conferences or even in the pre-stuff, Bo alludes to it every once in a while that we're not good enough and we need to get better. But I think just the simple math says you should have hit this panic button right about now, like in the last 5 games. And, who is it? Ron McLean that comes out on Sportsnet 650 and says, give them 6 more games and they'll be fine. I'm like, do you ever go to math class? Like 6 more games before you get your traction? You're going to be deleting so much stuff out of this. I love it. But anyways.
I've given a mental note just of the way. No, it's fine.
I know, I'm so sorry. So anyways, I'm like 6 more games. Like, no, it had to happen like a week ago at the worst. So I sit back and I say, what are they playing for? Okay, you said, Rob, what are they playing for? I think right now, you're playing for dignity. You're playing to say, you know what, maybe we can go on to see a St. Louis Blues-like run in the second half of the season and hopefully squeak into the 3rd or the 4th spot. Like, the season's not done, but the math is terrible based on the way that they're playing. Yeah. So obviously they're still playing to get into the postseason. Like, nothing's happened. They're 8-14-2 as of this conversation. Yeah. And I sit back and I'm like, I don't think they actually realize how bad it's been. I think they know how bad they've played, but I don't think they understand how bad the math is on this right now, because they're going to need a couple teams around them to play just as bad. And luckily for them, Calgary's not on fire and Montreal's coming back down to life. But I actually, just in listening to their comments, don't think they realize that the truncated season numbers are really against them right now.
Oh, that's well said, Rob. You're the first person I've heard say it like that. And, I joke around as being the founder of this fictional club, GLCPC, Good Looking Canucks Positivity Club. And I'll be the last person among the last people to ever say they're not going to make the playoffs. But yes, the math is bad, but you're right. It's almost like if they figured this out 5 or 6 games ago, they would have had a chance though. You're right. Calgary's flailing, Montreal's flailing. You're going to say, okay, forget it. We're not going to catch Toronto, Edmonton, or Winnipeg, but there's a chance that we could battle with these, including Ottawa, these other 3 teams. But yeah, they won 2 of the last 13, and it's there for them. And I get it. There's another team on the ice, so we can't just. It's not like the Canucks of 2011 where you think they're going to win every game. But it's just frustrating how they find different ways to win, whether it's giving up a 3-goal lead or not even scoring a goal. Like, it's just crazy. That's the confounding part for me.
Like, Clay, look at it like this. I remember even when I played baseball, not professionally, but I was on good teams where you came to the field and you just knew you were going to win. You just knew at some point something was going to happen and you were going to find your way to a win. I feel like these Canucks aren't looking to win. They're waiting to lose. Like, for example,
yeah.
Remember when that 3-2 goal came in? I think it was a minute into the third against Edmonton. And all of a sudden, Edmonton brings it to within 1. And you look at the clock and you're like, God, there's still 18 and a half minutes here. You knew that game, based on the way that the Canucks had played over the previous 10, was probably going to go against them. And then sure enough, the 3-3 goal, Puljujärvi scores. And then you sit there and you're like, here we go again. They had a 3-0 lead in that game. But all the buzzwords were there over the course of the next 4 goals to make you realize, like, this is going to happen again. Yeah. The 3-1 goal, they could have gotten out of that period up 3-0, but that one, just the seed was planted. Then the 3-2 goal early in the third, after no scoring in the second. I thought they played a decent period. But that 3-2 goal early was like, here we go again. And you could see it happening. And it's kind of like that train coming to you and you can't get off the tracks. You know it's going to hit you and you just watch it and your body doesn't do anything. And then it hits you and you're like, why didn't it move out of the way? And that's where the Canucks are right now mentally. And I said this just the other night. You look at these guys as numbers, you look at these guys as contracts, but the human element to this says right now they are fighting the mental game more than anything else. You could sit there and yell at Newell Brown. You could sit there and say Jim Benning's put them in a crappy position. At the end of the day, this is just a mental block that they have to push through. They need some puck luck. They need one break. Like, even if it's a Bull Durham rainout, like something that allows them the opportunity to finally snap out of this funk they're in. Yeah. And yeah, sure. Could they get hot and win 5 out of 6? They could, because they're good enough. But until they get past that mental block of, oh shit, something bad's going to happen today, the Eeyore status, I call it, they're done unless they can change quickly.
Oh, you make such a good point, Rob. Like, even after that 3-1 goal, you think, oh gosh, that's the worst thing to do is give up a goal in the last minute. But then you're right. Their second period was fine. Yet you're still up 2 goals and it didn't feel good. And of course, the way they're losing in overtime, they can't even get into the second minute of overtime. They can't even make one line change.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. All right. It's crazy to think that Travis Green's got no contract. There's thoughts of, well, if Jim Benning goes, maybe the new GM will want to bring his own guy in, but how much is he going to be able to spend, blah, blah, blah. What do you think is going to happen with both Jim Benning and Travis Green?
Okay, I think Jim Benning's gone. Okay. I think that's the non-negotiable. Sure, he's going to make it to the end of the season because Francesco doesn't want to pay 2 guys. That's cool. But there is no way. There is a better chance of an asteroid breaking up this conversation in the next 5 minutes than there is of Jim Benning being the GM of this team in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, look up. But Travis Green is an interesting one because if I'm Travis Green, even though I've got an embarrassment of riches with young talent like Pettersson, Hughes, Besser, Horvat, I mean, gosh, you could even throw Höglander in that conversation at this point. I mean, he's got this great young nucleus, but it's the worst bottom 6 in the NHL. It's another year of what's going to happen. There's going to be transition. And here's a question for you, Clay. What if he doesn't want to sign and he wants to go somewhere else? Somebody would hire Travis Green, and maybe it's not Seattle, but there's probably 4 or 5 teams out there that would definitely give him a second interview and probably a shot at an NHL job. Does he really want to be in an organization where Francesco's calling the shots from the blueberry farm and Jim Benning's just kind of walking around like Sandra Bullock in Bird Box trying to figure his way out of the problem? Like, the reality is Travis has options.
Yeah.
He's not just sitting here like, waiting for the crumbs to fall off of the table.
Yeah.
He's a guy that is good enough to coach at the NHL level. So we sit here about, how preposterous it is that he doesn't have a contract. What if he's gone from the guy that wants to coach this team to the guy that just wants to get to the end of the contract so that he can get the hell out of here? Because to be honest with you, Clay, as great as it is to have this young core, the 3rd line, the 4th line, all the shit that's coming around, the fact that there's not a lot of stuff on the farm, if I'm a coach, I'm like, dude, I'm not going through that.
Yeah.
Like, this is not set up for long-term success right now. You could bring over Podkolzin and do whatever. Rathbone maybe has a resurgence, who knows? But this core is going to just wither away from the inside out because there is no support for them. And there's no way you're going to get rid of these bum contracts. I actually think with Travis Green, I wouldn't sign an extension till the end of the season now. Maybe it doesn't get presented to him, so it's a moot point.
Right.
But if I'm Travis, I'm kicking tires. I'm weighing options before I sign.
That is such a fascinating point, Rob, because not only all those on-ice things you're talking about, the composition of the team, but then there might even be a slight feeling of disrespect from Aquilini.
100%.
Right? The Toffoli, Markstrom, Tanev effect. There might be a little bit of that. You put those two things together. You're the first person who suggests this, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Just, Clay, let's do it personally. Let's say you're working at a job and you're worthy of an extension, and your guy is hiding behind the COVID curtain saying that he doesn't have it, even though he's a billionaire. And you just sit back and you say, okay, you know what? They just erased this department. We don't have any good prospects. He's not hiring. He's not doing anything. Are you really going to sign a 3-year, 4-year extension?
No, not especially if I'm confident in my own ability. No, I wouldn't.
And it's bingo. That's what I'm saying. Travis has options. He's a really liked guy in the game. Yeah. Like, take off the veil of only things happen in Vancouver. You don't think he's talking to his guys back east? You don't think he's got connections where a couple of people are like, hey, man, if that thing in Vancouver doesn't work out, give me a call. Like, he's a good, young, sought-out coach. And I think right now Vancouver's got to realize that this could get worse before it gets better. Well said.
Well said. Very good, Rob. Well, I'll let you save the Canucks takes for your show. We'll wind up here. It's something I call the 5-hole. It's 5 rapid-fire questions. You can answer them as in-depthly or as minimally as you want. It's completely up to you. But
then I get to ask you one question.
Sure, I'm ready.
I'll do mine at the end. Or should I go first?
What? Let's end with it.
Okay. All right. I'm ready for yours. Fire away.
I think I know the answer to this one. The sport that you excel most at playing?
Baseball.
Awesome. How about one that you wish you could excel at playing?
Hockey. I'm terrible at hockey.
Would you be a forward, a D, or a goalie?
A goaltender, because then I don't have to skate.
Okay, that's awesome. I'll bring you on my roller hockey team. Number 2, you're starting a team from scratch. Elias Pettersson or Quinn Hughes?
Pettersson. Chicks love the long ball. They like guys who can score. And I think Pettersson's a little more of a poster boy as well.
Fair enough. Number 3, this is a good one, given what we talked about right at the start. What's your preference, Japanese food or Chinese food?
Oh, Japanese. It's not even close. Japanese food is the best food on earth.
Yeah, what do you like?
And I know people in Korea would kind of, shun me for saying that. Japanese food is the best food on earth.
Yeah. What do you like about it? What do you like to eat the most?
From Japanese cuisine?
Yeah.
Udon done well is world class.
Yeah.
The way that they can, I guess, show 8 different ways to cook the same piece of fish is really impressive. No, honestly, like, I sit there and I'm like, you could have a whole row of stuff cooked completely different, developed in different ways, and it's the exact same thing and you wouldn't even know it.
Yeah.
I think Japanese cuisine is smart food. Like, it's really smart and well thought out.
Yeah.
And just the attention to detail, second to none. Like, awesome. I adore Japanese cuisine.
Awesome. Number 4, speaking of food, this person is paying for dinner. So Rob, you don't have to pay, but you get to spend 2 hours with one of these 3 guys. Is it Travis Green? Is it Jim Benning? Or is it Francesco Aquilini? It's
Francesco.
Why?
It's Francesco. And because you want to talk to the horse. You want to get right to Jim Benning would be, okay, I could actually have this conversation with you. So conversation with Travis Green over 2 hours, we'd just be talking about old hockey stories, back in the days with the Caps, the Leafs, whatever. And, he might smile once. Jim Benning would be the slowest, most methodical conversation you've ever had. But Francesco's got a dark side. And I think I'd love to tap into that. Francesco's got shit he doesn't want you to know about. So for me, I'd be like, Francesco, let's put the Canucks on the back burner for a second. let's talk the talk, man. Like,
Yeah.
what's the dirtiest thing you've done in this city, man? Like, this is a guy that's into real estate, into wineries, everything. He's got his fingers into everything. But I'd want to talk about the greasy stuff. I'd be like, dude, completely off record. I'm zipped. Let's get down to business, because I know that guy's got some skeletons, and I'd love to learn about at least 2 of them.
Love it. Love it. And last question, and you can take a minute to think about this one just in case. What's one thing that people don't know about you? I know you're an open book, but what's one thing that most people don't know about Rob Fai?
Ooh, I'm ridiculously loyal. I think that's my one challenge that I face, is I've given too much for too little in return in some careers. Yeah. Like, time is money. And I've never looked at it that way. I've always felt if I'm doing my passion, then don't worry about the money. It'll all balance out at the end of life. But I think I've been taken advantage of once or twice. And, you know, I didn't really look at it like that at the time, because I was just so happy doing it. But to younger people getting into this industry, never undersell your value. Yes. And that's something that I tell to my kids as well. Like, if you're doing something, there's a dollar on that, or there's something that you should get back. Everything should be reciprocated. Because the one thing that you'll learn in life is, if they can get it for free, they're going to keep trying to get it for free. So unless you actually put your self-worth forward, then you're always just going to be the guy that's associated with the guy. You'll never become the guy. So I think that was my one challenge.
Great point. Whether your kids are 7 or 17, they are sponges. They observe everything that their parents do, how they treat people. I've said this a few times. Thank you for your honest answer with that. All right, I'm ready for your question, Rob.
What was your wedding song?
Very good. It was a song by a pianist named Jim Brickman, and it's called My Destiny.
Don't ask me, because I don't know. I just can't believe you know it. That's so impressive. Like, good for you, Clay. Play this part for your wife. It'll be advantageous, I promise.
Think she's listening upstairs, so it's either Destiny or My Destiny, but it's it's a nice song. Just,
how did you start doing the stuff with Marie? How did you guys get together? Because I still think that's your calling card. No, I appreciate that. So yes, I've done 36 parody songs now, 4 with the Canucks or about the Seahawks, but Marie's in the majority of them for sure. And Marie, I can tell you, thank you for asking, because I love sharing the story. We met through church, St. Paul's Catholic Church, which my wife still teaches at and I still minister at. And we were in a youth choir, and I was the pianist and the backup drummer, and she was the only teenage singer we allowed in, because it was supposed to be young adults only, right? 18 and up. But she was 16-year-old prodigy. She was. And so her family, she was raised Catholic as well. And then so that's how we met. We met through church. And then that was 20 years ago now. We were talking about it. So in 1990, when I was 26 and in 2000, when I was 26 and she was 16. So yeah, in the year 2000, we started hanging out a little bit. And then throughout the years, she was in and out of church, which is cool. I was still there. And then she was developing her music career. It included going to Macau, and she was actually singing overseas for a year and going back and forth while she was doing like communications and things. But she always had music as her very strong hobby, and she's very good at it. And then around 2011, I was trying to win. You might remember this. I was trying to win this blogging contest, replace the curtain blog. It was the first time that Halford and Bruff were going to the States, right? And guys like Stanchion won, which awesome. And, the guys like Thomas Stranson, there's all these guys in it. So then I said, Marie, what would you think of doing this little parody? And then we did a Katy Perry, Michael Jackson, and Adele mashup, put it in. And then most people really liked it. Some people saying, oh, this is a writing competition, not a music competition, which is fine. But ever since then, 2 or 3 times a year, we'll get together. I mean, we get together a lot, but 2 or 3 times a year, we'll get together to do Canucks songs. And sometimes it's even working with the team, which is cool, using their sound guys, video guys, camera guys, production guys, video editors. So we've done a few Christmas things with them. I've had Jake Vertanen and Ben Hutton dancing behind, in front of me. And then I've had Pedersen recognize me because of a song that Marie and I did for him. So I will say this, when we started, I was probably more well-known in Canucks circles than she was. And it's not like I would never, ever say that Marie's riding my coattails, but I will say now it's flipped and I'm certainly riding hers. I want to know more. When you're a backup drummer, do you wish ill on the guy that's actually playing the drums?
So, Yeah, let's see. Would Holtby want Demko to get hurt or play badly just so he can get in? I can't answer that, but for me, no. Piano is my forte. Backup drummers, man. Every song I play in 4/4. A 3/4 song, I still play 4. So I understand music, but no. As a backup drummer, is basically when the guy truly couldn't come. But I would not wish ill will on anyone because he was way better than me.
Come on, man. Just be bad for 1 minute, all right? Just once. That's terrible. Clay, you're such a good person. I'm so glad we had this conversation today.
Ditto, Rob. Thank you. And so just let everyone know, I'm sure they know, but where can most people find you, either on social or the show itself?
Absolutely. After you've watched Clay or before you watch Clay, subscribe to The Nation with Rob Fai on YouTube. We're on Twitch. We're on all the social platforms. And of course, you can get the audio version of the show in the morning. Go to iTunes and Spotify and all those usual places. I'm kind of the new kid on the block when it comes to this whole internet stuff, but I'm so thrilled to have the support of people around me. And I want to make sure I reciprocate that support right back to people. So yeah, man, I appreciate this conversation, Clay. You actually live up to the billing of the nicest guy on social media. I hate you for it, but more than anything, I can't wait to do this again.
Rob, thanks again for your time, and keep on doing what you're doing. And I can't wait to chat again soon. Thanks again.
Done.